I begged Dr. Cameron to let me be on the board, and today is just yet another day of my experience with him, of resurrection, restoration, reconciliation, renewal, regeneration, redemption, and remembrance. Thank God for the life of Dr. James Cameron.
First of all, he is Kweku, K-W-E-U, which means sweet messenger. He is the messenger. He's able to tell a story. And the story that he's telling is what happened to African Americans in this country and freedom-loving whites. That was his message. The ones who died and cannot tell their story.
This is a piece of the rope that was used to hang one of my two buddies here in Marion, Indiana, August the 7th, 1930, 65 years ago. After they'd hung him on a tree, they came back to get me because I was to be the third man. They wanted all three of us hanging on the tree that night. We had been pitching horseshoes that afternoon in a fellow named Ogden Weaver's backyard. And the moon was shining real bright that night. It was an August night, and about 9 o'clock, the horseshoe games broke up. As I was on my way home, Tommy asked me would I like to go for a ride. He had a 1926 Ford Roadster. And as soon as they started driving, they said, let's hold up somebody and get some money and buy another car. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I said, let me out of here. And they said, oh, say nothing to it. So all you got to do is just take a gun and put it on the people and say, stick them up. And if they don't stick them up, you just shoot them, that's all. I go up to the car, and I open the car door, and I held the gun up like this, and I said, stick them up. And this man and this lady got out of the car, this white man and this white lady. When the guy got out of the car, I looked at him, and you know what? He was a friend of mine. He was a nice white fella. We used to come down to a place where I shined shoes, and he'd tip me, and we'd always laugh and talk. And the young lady got out of the car. Her face was so pale and lovely and frightened. And I gave the gun back to Tommy, and I said, here, you guys take this gun. I said, I'm not going to have anything to do with you guys. And I left him out there at the scene of the crime. I kept on running until I got home, a distance of about 6 miles. And on the way over there to the jail, that was the first time in my life I ever prayed for white people that I can consciously remember. You know what I prayed for? I prayed that that man wouldn't die so he could say I hadn't shot him.
My mother went to the hospital on father. They had something like 11 or 12 hours before he died to be with him. And he made his peace with God. And that's a great satisfaction in my heart yet to this day. Naturally, he would have loved to live. He would have loved. We don't like to see that 1930. I'd lost my best friend.
Yeah, the crowd was beginning to gather as soon as we were put in jail. And by morning, they were cluttering up the jail yard. And all that day, they kept coming. And by nightfall, there was 10 to 15,000 whites out there screaming for the blood of us three blacks.
Very tense feeling among everybody. And you felt it all over town.
The sheriff had told the police not to shoot out there. There were women and children. And 4 big white men got some sledgehammers in their hands, and they started knocking on the cement blocks and throwing around the steel door that was the entrance to the jail.
And they come dragging one of the boys down out of the jail. They took him right down the sidewalk. Everybody was kicking, hitting him, and everything else. And there was a Model T Ford coupe that a woman was standing up there and they was all going crazy. And she jumped down. She had high heels. I seen this happen. And her high heels just scraped a hole just like cut with a knife down his back. And they pulled him out, and they drug him up there by a car. And they took him off of there and hung him up on a maple tree.
And he reached up to get hold of the rope to keep from choking him. So they let him down and broke his arms so he couldn't hang on to the rope. They pulled him up again as we went by.
Being young people, we naturally decided we'd go to Marion and see what was going on. The mob was in full control. It was mob violence at its worst.
They came in, they opened the door, and they said, "James Cameron, come forward." Well, James Cameron wasn't about to come forward after I'd seen what they'd done to Tommy and Abe. So at that precise moment, the sheriff came up, and he looked at me, and he looked at this other black boy, and he looked at that mob leader, and he said, "These are nothing but boys." He said, "Besides, Cameron ain't in here, so you done hung two of them, so that ought to satisfy you." Then he turned around and he went back downstairs. And when he went back downstairs, the crowd said, "Cameron is in there," and said, "We want him." And then they began to chant for me like a football player. "We want Cameron, we want Cameron, we want Cameron." And I thought I would die. I felt like I was in a rubber suit, and ice was packed all around me. I just felt cold and chill. Nothing could warm me. The mob turned around, went back upstairs. They said, "All right, Cameron's in here," and said, "If we don't get him, we're going to lynch every goddamn one of you niggers." And when they said that, half of the blacks in there fell down on their hands and knees and started to crawl around like trained animals. And they were hugging the pant legs of the mobsters and kissing their hands and saying, "Mr. White folks, please don't lynch us. We ain't nothing but a bunch of poor niggers in here with train riding. That boy ain't in here, honest he ain't." Now, they knew I was in there, Paul, but they were trying to save me. And this goes on until all the human endurance left in the bodies of those black men had been exhausted. Those crawling around on the floor. And one of them raised his hand. He said, "There he is, Mr. White folks. It wasn't on us, that's him." And then the mob closed in on me, and they started beating me.
Here came this crowd with this young man in the center of this crowd. I was up I did have a vantage point where I could see down, probably better than anyone else. And I did see this young man being dragged up the street, literally dragged with a rope around his neck.
And to me, with a rope around my neck. But a wonderful thing happened. When I prayed to God to have mercy on me and forgive me my sins, then a voice came out from heaven and said, "Take this boy back. He had nothing to do with any killing or raping." And then you know what? That mob suddenly got quiet as a pin. You could hear a pin drop. And they took the rope off my neck, and they allowed me to stumble and wobble back to the jail, which was just a half block away.
I can't tell you what happened after he got just up beyond me, just a little ways. It seemed like maybe the crowd began to disperse, and as if to say they'd always had their way. They'd spent their rage and their passion on these two young men, and maybe they had enough. That's what happened. Why it happened, or what occasioned the boys being spared, I cannot tell you. But all I know that he was spared his fate that night for some, I don't know whether Providence intervened or what, but he was spared.
I went back there, and those people said, "We didn't hear any voice. Said, you were just lucky, that's all." Well, if that's the way they want to put it, I was just lucky. And for those of us who believe in God, no explanation is necessary. But for those of us who don't believe in God, no explanation is possible.
And he felt that there was a reason that he survived. He felt that God had a mission for him, and that mission was to take this anger that he had inside, to take that terrible experience and turn it into something positive, to give something back to the world, not just his community, but give something back to the world.
See, Mr. Cameron, after he was freed, he went around the United States with Walter White, researching lynchings all across this country, many times barely escaping, getting out of the city before they tried to get him again.
So you single-handedly desegregated the movie theaters in Anderson?
Yes, that's right. But the thing of it is, when I went around to get membership for the NAACP, some of the blacks were scared. They said, They said, Cameron, you ought not to be doing this. So these white folks allowed files from our jobs. They all worked at the Elko Remy, a General Motors plant. And I kind of got weird of them, and I thought maybe them might try to do something to me. Because they were actually scared.
Were you at all scared?
No, I got enough to start a chapter. I got enough signatures and money to start a chapter. Same way in Muncie and Fort Wayne.
So you started chapters in Anderson, Muncie, and Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
Telling the story of people who cannot speak for themselves. When Emmett Till was found in the Mississippi River outside of Memphis, Tennessee, they also found 25 other bodies down there with barbed wire around it. The families thought they had gone off to work up north, and they were killed. And they were tarring and feathering all of it.
I told my wife, I said, honey, we need a museum like this in America to show what has happened to black people and freedom-loving white people who've been trying to help us ever since we've been in this country. And I said, I know what I'm going to do. And I came back. It took me 9 years to open up a little room about big as this room.
Because in his basement, he had about 10 or 15,000 books, things that he had studied. And then we talked many times while he was working at Mayfair about opening his museum, and he planned to open it on purpose on Juneteenth Day, 1988.
Come on in, come on in, come on in. Don't just line up there, it'll get spread out. You see, when they brought us over here from Africa, they put a...
You know, I think of the several times more than once, where I would see students in the museum sitting on chairs, and he would be sitting either standing or sitting on a chair and just talking with them and having a conversation with them. And that, I think, is, you know, sort of the quintessential James Cameron, in that he was able to connect with people.
Niggas get over on this side of the cell block. And they said, now, Cameron was in here and said, if we don't get him, we're going to lynch every goddamn one of you niggas. And when they said that, half of those blacks in there fell down on their hands and knees. And this goes on for about 5 minutes. And finally, those mobsters who had come up with the leader of the mob, they were standing down looking at the blacks crawling around on the floor like this, and they were just laughing themselves silly. They thought that was the best thing in the world, that white people should see how blacks were crawling around on the floor like that.
He was like Hitler.
I think Hitler. Man, look how bad they was hurt before they got him.
I know. Look at they flow.
Dragging them all in the street. How old was Thomas and Abe?
Tommy was 18 and Abe was 19.
Yeah.
See, when they hung him on the jail window back there, they stripped the clothes off of him for souvenirs. When they got ready to take him and hang him on the tree where they'd hung Abe.
He wanted to be a person who would challenge others. And that was very clear from the very beginning. He would say things that would really, you know, I suppose agitate people, particularly people who are European American descent.
You know, he was shouting and, you know, cussing at the Klan members as they were walking by, and telling them what they could do and where they could go and stuff. And the staff was like, oh, Dr. Cameron, do you kiss your mother with that mouth? You know, it was like a big joke because it was so funny to see him do. But they said that he would say stuff and then laugh at himself that he, you know, that he had actually said it, and he got a kick out of it because I think he recognized the importance of him being there, and he knew that he needed to be there, but he enjoyed the fact that he could, you know, that he had the right to be there and say what he thought and how he felt, and bring some media attention because he was there, and that it take the focus off of the Klan and not make it be so much about them.
I just told her I've been in trouble, I have a prison record. I'm an ex-con. She said, that's all right. What you used to be and what you are now that counts. So that's what I am now. What counts.
That's right.
So, what do you love most about each other? Okay.
I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say, but he knows.
I know, but I ain't gonna say it either.
Oh, okay. So this is going to be between the two of you. I just thought I'd ask it on the occasion of your anniversary.
Well, mutual satisfaction.
Yes, that's right.
And that's held you together?
Yeah.
How many years?
67, 68 years.
Yeah. Ooh, I forget. But he has it packed right down to the. He know exactly. But since I had surgery, I forget half of the time.
But he remembers.
Yeah. He's good for that, too. I'm glad he didn't lose his mind when he went through. He's had a tough life. He has. He went through a lot.
But just in the love for him and the spirit he brought. But the key spirit for me was always his ability to forgive. The forgiveness spirit, which is something we all work on, and we work on it continually, but he represented that aspect of it. Never to forget our history, but always remember that you can forgive. And I thought that was the most strength that he brought to this community, but to this world.
Hey, there we go.
You here?
Yeah. Yeah. Senator.
Howdy.
James Camerman?
Yes, sir. How do you
Pleased
do?
to meet you.
Thank you. Same
I'm
here.
William Dieter Jr.,
Yes.
youngest brother of Claude Dieter.
Yes, I knew Claude.
You knew Claude.
Yes,
You told me by phone
Yes.
that Claude was your friend.
Yes, he was.
And I'm here to welcome you
Thank you.
to this church, to this group.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask you, to the depths of my heart, to forgive me. I love you.
Thank you.
There's no discrimination ever in my heart towards you.
I knew
My
that.
father, mother,
I knew it.
Claude, or to all the 8 boys, never a word written, spoke, said, published about the situation.
I understand.
It's great to be here.
Thank
Wonderful
you.
to be
Thank
here.
you.
If you'd
And
care
I-
to,
and
I
I
would
want
even
to-
go to the altar and kneel with you. And here we are to kneel and to believe that God has brought us together.
Yeah.
And God has brought us together. I'm so thankful for your attitude and spirit. I'm so thankful. I still like you. I still like you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's just great to be here. It's
Christians
great to
all
be
should
here.
hang
It's great to
together.
be here.
Beautiful.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
It's just wonderful. It's just wonderful.
As I said in the beginning, I think that's the big story that went untold, is Will and Grace Dieter's forgiveness. If you can imagine having your own flesh and blood son, 23 years old, and have him murdered, and that same night going down to the perpetrator's parents and telling them that they have forgiven. Oh. And that rug got worn out in the house by Will Dieter, walking back and forth and praying constantly. And he got the message. God bless him.
When he felt that if a lynching victim could be transformed into someone who loved everyone, then anybody could be transformed. And that was, I think, the primary motivation and the drive behind everything that Dr. Cameron did.
Just history. He wasn't looking for martyrdom. He wasn't looking to be a hero. He was looking to show what has happened to us, and so that we can get over this thing that's on the inside of us that won't allow us to be human.
They can know that love is a wonderful thing. You have to have love in your heart. No hatred. Hatred is a disease that eats into the core of the whole body and destroys the body from within. But if you have love, you can blossom as the sun shines every day.
Sometimes I'm up and sometimes I'm down, coming to carry me home. is heavenly bound, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, low, sweet chariot, coming to carry